Fighting video game bosses is hard work. They usually come equipped with special abilities and buffs that give them an unfair advantage, making you wish you could get some of that power for yourself. Although they are meant to serve as a challenge for you to overcome, some bosses can be secretly made playable if you manage to meet the right requirements. The best part is that these kind of games we're talking about here specifically don't undermine the character's abilities once you unlock them, meaning you can truly experience what it's like to be a video game boss. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 video games that let you play as the boss. Number 10. Evil Mode Characters. Lord of the Rings: The Third Age. Lord of the Rings: The Third Age is a unique turn-based RPG from 2004 set in the beloved world of J.R.R. Tolkien. The main characters of the game are a group of adventurers tasked with finding Boromir, but it also features a secret evil mode in which you actually get to play as the enemies you fought during your journey, including all the bosses. The evil mode is unlocked fairly simply. All you gotta do is beat the stage and you unlock the ability to replay it as the villains. The first evil stage is obtained after finishing the West Moria part of the map, and from this point on, every subsequent level you complete allows you to re-experience things from the evil perspective. It's an absolutely novel and one-of-a-kind mechanic within the genre, and it's surprisingly in-depth as well. You start off fighting your hero characters as orcs, and then you move on to trolls, then Nazguls, and even the legendary demon Balrog. Best of all, you get to use that same power the bosses were able to use against you, meaning you can feel exactly how satisfying it is to kick your own butt. Number 9. Gangrel: Fire Emblem Awakening. One of the Fire Emblem series traditions is that some of the enemies you fight can be recruited into your party. Fire Emblem Awakening features a couple of such characters in its roster, but what you might not have known is that it also allows you to do the same with one of the game's villains, King Gangrel. The Mad King of Plagia serves as the main antagonist and final boss of the first act of the game. But if you have the spot pass for Awakening, after you defeat him, you can actually add him to your party with a special event in Paralog 18. In the quest, it's revealed that Gangrel has miraculously survived his last stand with your character. Disgraced and pushed from his throne, he now works for a group of pirates as a lowly servant. Gangrel's new situation is so bad, he personally asks your team to kill him when they find out he's still alive. However, you can convince him to join you instead. While it's certainly weird to travel with the same guy who killed your character's sister and started a bloody war, it's also pretty fun to command your ex-nemesis in battle. Who's the king now? Number 8. True Ogre: Tekken 3. Every now and then, fighting games like to pitch you against enemies that aren't present in your regular rosters. These are typically monstrous, oversized final bosses that would normally have no right to act as proper playable characters, but do indeed make for a good final challenge. Unless you're playing Tekken 3, then the final monster boss is good as both. Tekken 3's final boss is the True Ogre, a giant monstrous demon who looks like he belongs in Dark Souls more than in a fighting tournament. The fight with the demon is extremely hard, since unlike other characters, he has a completely different physique than you're used to comprehending with, and abilities that can take up the whole battlefield. Because of this, it doesn't feel like it should be possible to play as him, but to many players' surprise, it is. To get the Towering Brute, you have to beat Tekken 3's arcade mode with all 9 characters, which is absolutely no simple task, but the challenge makes sense given that True Ogre on your roster doesn't lose any of his abilities. You can spam his area of effect attacks and other high damage combos, making him the ideal character for tormenting your friends. Number 7. Devil Jin: Tekken 5. Tekken 5 is another entry in the series that, similar to the third installment, features a super difficult secret boss and then allows the player to unlock them with all of their original powers. Devil Jin is the demonic form of the iconic Tekken character Jin. He's the secret final boss of Tekken 5, or rather one of many, and he has the unique ability to fly and fire large laser beams which cover most of the battlefield. Fighting the winged demon is a difficult challenge and unlike any other boss fight in the game. That said, if you beat him enough times, you get to use his extraordinary powers for yourself. To unlock Devil Jin, you have to either beat the devil within side mode or the main story with every character, which basically means fighting the demon with every single fighter at the end of their own personal quests. The task is pretty daunting, but once you accomplish it, Devil Jin is yours to use however you want, along with his powerful laser combos which allow you to take down huge chunks of your opponent's health with a single strike. Number 6. Dowd, Dishonored Knife of Dunwall. The plot of Dishonored focuses on Corvo taking out the conspiracy responsible for killing his beloved Empress and incriminating him for the murder. Most of the people you're after are the city's rich and influential, but truth be told, the real villain is the one who made all of this possible, the assassin Dowd. Dowd, who curiously enough you can play as with the help of the Knife of Dunwall DLC. The supernaturally gifted killer is the main character of the expansion, giving you a glimpse into the events that led up to the assassination of the Empress and everything that happened to him afterward. You even get to reenact the base game's intro from his perspective by sneaking into the Empress's palace and then delivering the killing blow right as Corvo is staring right at you. It's a bizarre but fascinating experience, which is made all the more fun thanks to the fact that Dowd comes with his own brand of supernatural abilities, which you only got to see glimpses of in the original game when you were fighting him. It feels pretty great to wield powers you had to oppose before, even if technically you're using them to assassinate people you were trying to defend. Number 5. Dark Team, Sonic Adventure 2. The rivalry between Sonic and Shadow is one of the most iconic beefs in video game history. The two hedgehogs have been at each other's throats since 2001 with the release of Sonic Adventure 2, where Shadow made his debut. It's also the first game which allowed you to play as the speedy bad guy himself. Sonic Adventure 2 is well known for its unique gameplay mechanic in which you can play as different teams that appear in the story. You start off playing as Sonic and his friends known as the Hero Team. However, after you complete the game from their perspective, you can go back and replay in Dark Team mode, donning the role of the antagonists. The Dark Team gives you a glimpse into the villainous side of the Sonic world, and their missions give you more context as to what's happened in the story. The mode is honestly a great introduction into the Sonic series' most famous antagonists, as it allows the player to get immediately well acquainted with them and their goals. It's no wonder why Shadow became such a huge hit with the fanbase, even though technically he is acting as an evil counterpart to the beloved Blue Blur. Number 4. Ganondorf, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Hyrule Warriors is the Legend of Zelda's spin on the classic Dynasty Warriors formula of defeating entire armies of enemies with a single, beefed-up character. In the game, you can play as all of the Zelda franchise's beloved heroes, including Link, Zelda, Impa, and a bunch of others, as you try and stop Ganon and his armies of evil. At least, that is until you can play as the tyrannical king himself. Yep, although he serves as the main antagonist and boss of the game, Ganon is secretly an unlockable playable character. In order to play as him, you have to complete the main story at least once, and then complete a series of versus challenges against powerful bosses. The process is definitely challenging, but the reward is totally worth it. Ganon, or rather his Calamity Ganon form, is an absolute force of nature on the battlefield. Playing as him makes you feel like the menace he is in the story, as his fighting mechanics require you to kill enemies to gather malice and then consume the power of your defeated opponents to unleash even more awesomely ruinous attacks. It just goes to show that the world needs a proper Ganon spin-off. Number 3. Bowser, Super Mario RPG. Super Mario RPG is an interesting addition to the legendary franchise about the Italian plumber that takes its well-established characters and puts them in a bunch of humorous scenarios with a turn-based RPG flair. The title's full of situations where the characters don't really act like themselves, and the best example of that is one of the game's recurring bosses, Bowser. Why? Because unlike his typical self, he actually joins forces with Mario. For once. Let's go. Mario RPG features Bowser as both a boss and a playable character. The first few times you meet him, he attacks Mario with his troops, but each time he's defeated, his army shrinks, and eventually, the turtle is left with no one to keep him company. Out of boredom and self-pity, he eventually joins your party, pretending to be recruiting you, and from that point on, he becomes fully playable. As a former boss and antagonist, Bowser naturally enjoys way higher stats than the rest of your team, but let's be honest, the main fun of having him tag along is simply being able to play as an iconic video game villain. Number 2. Ivan Ooze, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the Fighting Edition. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the Fighting Edition is the fighting game spin-off of the famous show about a group of spandex-wearing heroes. Like many other fighting games, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers allows you to pick from a number of combatants to complete new challenges, and you get to unlock more as you progress through the story. Some of these unlockable characters are the villains you defeat along the way, and while most of them have their powers diminished after you acquire them, Ivan Ooze, one of the game's bosses, doesn't. If anything, he actually becomes stronger in the player's hands. The character's notorious among those who played the game because although he's a tough boss, he's an even tougher playable combatant. You see, some players discovered that the monster's move called Invulnerable Strike is the most damaging attack in the game, and when you get to control him, you can just mercilessly spam it, taking down any opponent in a matter of seconds. It's a good thing his AI isn't nearly as abusive, or no one would have completed the game. Number 1. Spectre, Plague, and King Knight. Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight is an incredible platformer from WhatCulture Games, where you and your short spade-wielding warrior have to fight an entire gallery of vibrant bosses, and then you get to play as them. Over the years, Shovel Knight has released a multitude of unique DLCs that allow you to play as all the knights you had to fight in the original game, with more story-centric packs that provide their own abilities and backstories. The first few of these DLCs began with Spectre and Plague Knight, establishing the idea of being able to fill in the shoes of the villains. Following such well-received additional storylines, WhatCulture delivered one of the finest expansions yet with King of Cards, featuring King Knight himself. Not only does the DLC tell the tale of the royals' rise and fall exceedingly well, but unlike the previous boss characters, the playable King Knight is actually made stronger than the original. It makes sense, given that the story shows King Knight losing some of his power by aligning with the Enchantress. Honestly though, if you play through the DLC, you'll just be glad you didn't have to face him when he was at his peak.